If you've ever wanted a pretty good reminder that God doesn't forget about you, you can find one in the book of Joshua in chapter 16. In Joshua chapter 16, the Israelites, they're in the process of divvying up the promised land. Remember, they had been on a very long journey from years of slavery in Egypt to release from slavery in Egypt to 40 years of wandering in the desert through a lot of challenges and frustrations along the way until they finally got to the promised land and they were able to occupy it, and it was finally time to figure out where everyone was going to live. And in Joshua chapter 16, they're divvying up the land to the descendants of Joseph. I like the story of Joseph a lot. You might be familiar with that one. Joseph lived in the Old Testament. He was one of the sons of a man named Jacob, and his relationship with his brothers wasn't very good at all. His brothers ended up selling him, thinking they would never see him again, and they were kind of happy about that. And then Joseph goes on a journey through a lot of ups and downs, mostly downs, as he's forgotten about again and again and again and again. His life gets harder and harder and harder and harder, until one day, God pulled him out of a prison and very quickly made him one of the most powerful people in the world. Joseph was someone that I think would have been tempted to think, God has forgotten about me. Look at where I am. Look at how hard my life is. Look at the challenges I'm facing. Look at how sad I am. For years, Joseph could have said those things. But through it all, God remembered him. He remembered to love him in the end. He remembered to elevate him. And in Joshua chapter 16, even so many years after Joseph had died, God remembered not just him, but the people who came through him, his children, his descendants. He's giving out land to the descendants of Joseph. God didn't forget about him. There might be a lot of times in life that you're tempted to think that God has forgotten about you. And maybe it's because you're looking at your life and you're seeing it so clearly. It's because your life is hard, harder than you ever thought it would be. Or maybe because you feel alone, more alone than you ever have. Or maybe because you messed up and you know what you would do if you were in God's situation. You would want nothing to do with you. Well, stop looking at your life for a second to evaluate whether or not God chooses to remember you and love you. And instead look at the life of Jesus. Look at him. God come down to earth in fragile human flesh, being laid in a prickly manger, and then growing up not to be applauded and adored by everyone, but to be hated and crucified and to suffer and to die when he didn't have to, but he chose to, because he was keeping God's promise to never forget you, to never forget to forgive you, to never forget to be there for you, to never forget to have you on his mind. He always does. And not just you. The people that your life touches too. The people you love. The people you care for. The people you think about. God thinks about them too. He always will. Just like he will always think of you. Rest well tonight, my friends.